Episode 51. Divination was Harry's least favorite class after potions, which was due mainly to Professor Trelawney's habit of predicting his premature death every few lessons. A thin woman, heavily draped in shawls and glittering with strings of beads, she always reminded Harry of some kind of insect, with her glasses hugely magnifying her eyes. She was busy putting copies of battered, leather bound books on each of the spindly little tables with which her room was littered when Harry entered the room. But so dim was the light cast by the lamps covered in scarves and the low burning, sickly scented fire that she appeared not to notice him as he took a seat in the shadows. The rest of the class arrived over the next 5 minutes. Ron emerged from the trapdoor, looked around carefully, spotted Harry, and made directly for him, or as directly as he could, while having to wend his way between tables, chairs, and overstuffed poufs. "Hermione and me have stopped arguing," he said, sitting down beside Harry. "Good," grunted Harry. "But Hermione says she thinks it would be nice if you stopped taking out your temper on us," said Ron. I'm just passing on the message," said Ron, talking over him. "But I reckon she's right. It's not our fault how Seamus and Snape treat you." "I never said it." "Good day," said Professor Trelawney in her usual misty, dreamy voice, and Harry broke off, feeling both annoyed and slightly ashamed of himself again. "And welcome back to divination. I have, of course, been following your fortunes most carefully over the holidays, and am delighted to see that you have all returned to Hogwarts safely, as, of course, I knew you would. You will find on the tables before you copies of The Dream Oracle by Inigo Imago. Dream interpretation is a most important means of divining the future, and one that may very probably be tested in your owl. Not, of course, that I believe examination passes or failures are of the remotest importance when it comes to the sacred art of divination. If you have the seeing eye, certificates and grades matter very little. However, the headmaster likes you to sit the examinations, so—" Her voice trailed away delicately, leaving them all in no doubt that Professor Trelawney considered her subject above such sordid matters as examinations. "Turn, please, to the introduction and read what Imago has to say on the matter of dream interpretation. Then divide into pairs. Use the dream oracle to interpret each other's most recent dreams. Carry on." The one good thing to be said for this lesson was that it was not a double period. By the time they had all finished reading the introduction of the book, they had barely 10 minutes left for dream interpretation. At the table next to Harry and Ron, Dean had paired up with Neville, who immediately embarked on a long-winded explanation of a nightmare involving a pair of giant scissors wearing his grandmother's best hat. Harry and Ron merely looked at each other glumly. "I'll never remember my dreams," said Ron. "You say one." "You must remember some of them," said Harry impatiently. He was not going to share his dreams with anyone. He knew perfectly well what his regular nightmare about a graveyard meant. He did not need Ron or Professor Trelawney or the stupid dream oracle to tell him that. "Well, I had one that I was playing Quidditch the other night," said Ron, screwing up his face in an effort to remember. "What do you reckon that means?" "Probably that you're going to be eaten by a giant marshmallow or something," said Harry, turning the pages of the dream oracle without interest. It was very dull work looking up bits of dreams in the oracle, and Harry was not cheered up when Professor Trelawney set them the task of keeping a dream diary for a month as homework. When the bell went, he and Ron led the way back down the ladder, Ron grumbling loudly. "Do you realize how much homework we've got already? Binns sent us a 1.5-foot-long essay on giant wars. Snape wants a foot on the use of moonstones, and now we got a month's dream diary from Trelawney. Fred and George weren't wrong about Owl Year, were they? That Umbridge woman had better not give us any." When they entered the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom, they found Professor Umbridge already seated at the teacher's desk, wearing the fluffy pink cardigan of the night before and the black velvet bow on top of her head. Harry was again reminded forcibly of a large fly perched unwisely on top of an even larger toad. The class was quiet as it entered the room. Professor Umbridge was as yet an unknown quantity, and nobody knew how strict a disciplinarian she was likely to be.
"Well, good afternoon,"
she said when finally the whole class had sat down. A few people mumbled "Good afternoon" in reply.
"Tut, tut,"
said Professor Umbridge.
"That won't do now, will it? I would like you, please, to reply, 'Good afternoon, Professor Umbridge.' One more time, please. 'Good afternoon, class.'"
"Good afternoon, Professor Umbridge," they chanted back at her.
"There now,"
said Professor Umbridge sweetly.
"That wasn't too difficult, was it? Wands away and quills out, please."
Many of the class exchanged gloomy looks. The order "wands away" had never yet been followed by a lesson they had found interesting. Harry shoved his wand back inside his bag and pulled out quill, ink, and parchment. Professor Umbridge opened her handbag, extracted her own wand, which was an unusually short one, and tapped the blackboard sharply with it. Words appeared on the board at once.
"Defense Against the Dark Arts, a return to basic principles." "Well now, your teaching in this subject has been rather disrupted and fragmented, hasn't it?"
stated Professor Umbridge, turning to face the class with her hands clasped neatly in front of her.
"The constant changing of teachers, many of whom do not seem to have followed any ministry-approved curriculum, has unfortunately resulted in your being far below the standard we would expect to see in your Owl Year. You will be pleased to know, however, that these problems are now to be rectified. We will be following a carefully structured, theory-centered, ministry-approved course of defensive magic this year. Copy down the following, please."
She rapped the blackboard again. The first message vanished and was replaced by
Course aims. 1. Understanding the principles underlying defensive magic. 2. Learning to recognize situations in which defensive magic can legally be used. 3. Placing the use of defensive magic in context for practical use.
For a couple of minutes the room was full of the sound of scratching quills on parchment. When everyone had copied down Professor Umbridge's 3 course aims, she said,
"Has everybody got a copy of Defensive Magical Theory by Wilbert Slinkhart?"
There was a dull murmur of assent throughout the class.
"I think we'll try that again," said Professor Umbridge. "When I ask you a question, I should like you to reply, 'Yes, Professor Umbridge,' or 'No, Professor Umbridge.' So, has everybody got a copy of Defensive Magical Theory by Wilbert Slinkhart?"
"Yes, Professor Umbridge," rang through the room.
"Good,"
said Professor Umbridge.
"I should like you to turn to page 5 and read Chapter 1, Basics for Beginners. There will be no need to talk."